4 decades back, people enjoyed meals that are shocking and even illegal by today's standards. Back then, no one thought twice about certain ingredients, food additives, or even exotic meats that are now strictly off-limits. So today, let's uncover foods that illegal now but normal to eat in the 1980s. Horse meat. Back in the 1980s, eating horse meat wasn't unusual in some parts of the world, including the US and Europe. It was a cheap and widely available protein source, often found in butcher shops and even canned products. While it was sold in specialty butcher shops, it stayed pretty unpopular. However, there were a couple of reasons for this. First, the Pilgrims brought over Europe's old ban on eating horse meat, which actually goes back to pre-Christian traditions. And second, by the 1700s, America was overflowing with other meat options. Even during the Civil War, beef prices actually dropped because there was a surplus, plus new access to Western cattle. As time went on, innovations like railroads, meatpacking plants, and refrigeration made beef even more widely available. So even when beef prices went up now and then, it was never enough to make Americans turn to horse meat. However, over time, public opinion shifted. Horses became more valued as pets and companions rather than food sources. Concerns about animal welfare and the presence of harmful drugs in horse meat also played a role in its ban. Today, selling horse meat for human consumption is illegal in many places, though it's still eaten in some countries like Japan and Italy. Raw milk. For centuries, fresh milk came straight from the Quaker farm, unprocessed, unpasteurized, and according to its fans, completely pure. Even in the 1980s, raw milk was still a favorite in rural communities and among health-conscious folks who swore by its rich taste and supposed nutritional benefits. But health officials saw things differently, and soon raw milk became the center of a heated debate: tradition versus safety. Unlike the pasteurized milk in grocery stores, raw milk skips the heating process that kills harmful bacteria. While supporters believed this preserved valuable enzymes and nutrients, the risks were real. Dangerous pathogens like Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli could lurk in unpasteurized dairy, leading to serious illness and even death. As outbreaks linked to raw milk increased, regulators stepped in. In 1987, the FDA banned interstate sales, and individual states followed with their own restrictions. Some outlawed it completely, while others allowed limited sales under strict conditions, often requiring direct farm purchases. But despite the risks, raw milk still has a loyal fan base, with supporters arguing that modern hygiene practices make it safer than ever. Sassafras oil. Many decades back, sassafras oil was a common ingredient in root beer, teas, and homemade remedies. Sassafras wasn't just used as medicine, it was also a popular food additive. It came from the sassafras tree and was loved for its strong, spicy flavor. But here's the worst part: that tea had a ton of safrole in it, about 4.5 times more than what's considered safe. Scientists even discovered that safrole, a compound in sassafras oil, could cause liver damage and was linked to cancer in lab animals. That was enough for the FDA to ban it in food and drinks. Adding to the controversy, safrole is also used in making illegal drugs, leading to tighter restrictions. While artificial flavors replaced it in root beer, some still seek sassafras for its nostalgic taste. Kinder Surprise Eggs. Before the introduction of cookies and Kinder Surprise Eggs were a fun treat for kids. If you have never heard of them, Kinder Surprise Eggs are these hollow chocolate shells with little toys hidden inside. This plastic capsule came with chocolate on the outside and a hidden toy on the inside. They were originally made for Easter, but now you can find them all year round. But in the US, they became illegal due to safety concerns. The FDA banned them because the small toy inside posed a choking hazard, violating a rule against embedding non-edible objects in food. While still popular in many countries, U.S. Customs seizes thousands of them each year. To get around the ban, Kinder introduced a legal version called Kinder Joy, where the toy and chocolate are kept separate. But for many adults, the original Kinder Surprise remains iconic. Shark fin soup. For centuries, luxury dining were all about status, and nothing speaks status quite like a steaming bowl of shark fin soup. Served at weddings, celebrations, and business deals, it was a sign of wealth, generosity, and tradition. But this extravagant dish came at a massive cost, not just for consumers, but for the ocean itself. By the 1980s, global demand for shark fins had exploded, leading to a cruel practice known as shark finning. Fishermen would catch sharks, slice off their fins, and toss the still-living animals back into the water, where they would slowly die. This wasteful and brutal practice devastated shark populations and threw ocean ecosystems into chaos. Marine scientists began sounding the alarm, warning that shark finning was pushing several species toward extinction. Despite these concerns, the dish remained popular, with many diners unaware or unconcerned about its impact. On top of that, food safety experts pointed out another major issue. Shark meat contains high levels of mercury, making frequent consumption a serious health risk. Over time, awareness grew, and many countries took action, banning shark finning and restricting the sale of shark fin soup. Fugu, pufferfish. Since at least 2600 BC, humans have been eating fugu, also known as pufferfish. It was considered a delicacy in Japan and other parts of Asia. These pufferfish come in all sizes, from tiny ones just a few inches long to giant ones that can grow up to 2 feet. They mostly hang out in tropical and subtropical waters, and just like their name suggests, they have a cool defense trick. When they feel threatened, they puff up by swallowing a ton of water or air. This makes them look way scarier and also a lot harder to eat. It was still served in high-end restaurants, prepared by specially trained chefs who knew how to avoid its deadly toxins. But health officials saw things differently, and eventually the risks of eating pufferfish led to stricter regulations. The fish contains tetrodotoxin, a poison that can cause paralysis and even death. Mistakes in preparation proved fatal, leading many countries to ban its sale. Despite the dangers, fugu remains a sought-after dish, with trained chefs still serving it under strict guidelines. Casu marzu, maggot cheese. Before the invention of vegan cheese, a traditional Sardinian cheese was made using a unique and controversial method, allowing cheese flies to lay eggs inside, leading to a soft, creamy texture filled with live maggots. It was called the casu marzu, and by the 1980s it was still enjoyed by locals who believed it had superior flavor and even aphrodisiac qualities. When you dig into the creamy, mushy casu marzu cheese, the maggots inside don't just sit there. They freak out, curl up like tiny springs, and can launch themselves up to half a foot in the air, sometimes straight at your face. To keep them from jumping, some people chill the cheese to slow them down, while others seal it in an airtight container to suffocate them right before eating. But let's be real, the grubs are still very much in there. However, many health officials saw things differently, and eventually, concerns over food safety led to a ban. The cheese carries risks of foodborne illness, including intestinal infections. Despite the ban under EU regulations, it remains a sought-after delicacy, often produced in secret and shared among those who still crave its taste. Haggis. Back in the days, haggis was a beloved Scottish dish for many restaurants. This dish was made from sheep's heart, liver, and lungs, mixed with oats and spices, all stuffed into a sheep's stomach. It was still widely enjoyed, especially at Burns Night celebrations. But U.S. health officials saw things differently, and in 1971, a ban was placed on foods containing sheep lungs due to concerns over contamination during processing. Despite the restriction, haggis remains a cultural icon in Scotland, and fans in the U.S. have turned to lung-free versions. Still, traditional haggis lovers argue that nothing quite compares to the real thing. Ackee fruit. Before soursop, ackee fruit has been a Caribbean favorite, especially in Jamaica, where it's the star of the famous ackee and saltfish dish. People were still enjoying it fresh and canned without much worry. But U.S. health officials weren't so convinced. Turns out if ackee isn't fully ripe, it contains a toxin called hypoglycin that can cause serious illness or worse. If ackee isn't ripe, it's packed with a high level of hypoglycin, which messes with your blood sugar levels and can cause severe hypoglycemia. And if that gets out of control, it can lead to a coma or worse. Numerous cases of Jamaican vomiting sickness led the FDA to ban fresh ackee imports. Today, only canned ackee that meets safety standards is allowed. Beluga caviar. One long-standing sign of luxury dining has been beluga caviar. And let's be honest, Americans had a serious craving for it, eating up about 60% of the world's supply. But that kind of demand came at a cost. Just like sharks, beluga sturgeons weren't safe in their own waters. However, overfishing pushed them toward extinction, forcing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to ban the buying and selling of beluga products. While caviar is still a top-tier delicacy in America, beluga is off the menu. Who knows, if overfishing continues, other caviar varieties might face the same fate. Trans fats. When it comes to breakfast staples, margarine has been a regular spread for generations. Whether you are in the US or halfway across the world, chances are you have slathered it on toast at some point. And for a long time, people enjoyed it without a second thought. After all, it was supposed to be a healthier alternative to butter. But then there are trans fats. This partially hydrogenated oil was a cheap alternative to butter and lard. And wow, did it make pie crusts extra flaky. It also helped baked goods last longer and gave foods a better texture. For decades, food companies loaded it into cookies, crackers, bread, frozen meals, you name it. Even restaurants used it for frying. For years, margarine was packed with these harmful fats, which were later linked to heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer in extreme cases. Eventually, the FDA stepped in and banned them, because honestly, no spread is worth that risk. Foie gras. In the world of fancy foods, few things scream luxury like foie gras. This buttery, rich delicacy, made from the liver of ducks or geese, was a regular in high-end restaurants, and back in the 1980s, no one really questioned it. Foie gras comes from the livers of male ducks, which means female ducklings are basically worthless to the industry. In France alone, about 40 million of them every year are thrown alive into grinders, where they are turned into fertilizer or cat food. But here's where it all gets interesting. Foie gras is made by force-feeding the birds to fatten their livers, a practice animal rights activists call cruel and inhumane. Over time, the controversy grew, and places like California and New York banned its sale. Artificial red dye number 3. Some say pasteurization dulls the flavor, while others just miss the thrill of living a little dangerously. Speaking of risks, candy makers had one simple rule. If it's red, it has to be bright, bold, and impossible to resist. Bright red gumballs, cherry-flavored treats, and even festive holiday snacks all got their eye-catching color from one key ingredient, red dye number 3. The problem started when scientists were linking red dye number 3 to some pretty serious health risks. Studies found that high doses caused cancer in lab rats, and public concern quickly followed. The FDA banned its use in cosmetics and certain drugs in 1990, but oddly enough, it remained legal in food and drinks. Even today, red dye number 3 still sneaks into some snacks and processed foods, despite ongoing debates about its safety. Cyclamate artificial sweetener. By the 1980s, diet culture was in full swing, and food companies were on a mission to make everything sugar-free. From sodas to snack cakes, artificial sweeteners had all the sweetness needed. One of the biggest names in the game was sodium cyclamate, a super sweet, super cheap sugar substitute. First introduced in the 1950s, cyclamate was 30 to 50 times sweeter than sugar, and way more affordable than alternatives like saccharin. It quickly became regular for diet sodas and low-calorie desserts. Years later, everything changed. Studies linked cyclamate to bladder cancer in lab rats, and the FDA didn't waste any time banning it in the US, despite ongoing debates about whether it was actually harmful to humans. Meanwhile, cyclamate stuck around in over 40 countries, including parts of Europe, where regulators deemed it safe in controlled amounts. Turtle meat. In the world of exotic meats, turtle was once a prized delicacy. Whether in stews, soups, or gourmet dishes, turtle meat was consumed in some cultures and fine dining menus. Back then, no one really questioned it. If anything, it was considered a luxury. But there was a problem. Overhunting and habitat destruction pushed many turtle species to the brink of extinction. As their numbers dropped, conservationists stepped in, and laws were put in place to protect them. Today, hunting and selling turtle meat is banned in many places. Meanwhile, not all turtle meat is off-limits. If you are curious about what all the turtle buzz was about, you can still find dishes made with snapping turtle meat in some parts of the US. Ortolan, songbird dish. When it comes to fine dining, few dishes were as exclusive and controversial as the ortolan. Once the ortolan is marinated in brandy, it's cooked, plucked, and served whole. This tiny songbird was a delicacy in French cuisine, traditionally eaten whole, bones and all, with diners famously covering their heads with napkins. Some say to hide from God, then pop the entire bird into your mouth in one bite, bones, feet, head, and all. However, concerns over animal cruelty and dwindling ortolan populations led to strict protections. France eventually banned its hunting and sale, though some chefs and food lovers still try to get their hands on it illegally. These days, the ortolan remains a forbidden bite, more legend than luxury. Brominated vegetable oil. Many decades back, if you cracked open a bottle of citrus soda, there was a good chance it contained brominated vegetable oil. This stuff was used to keep flavoring oils from separating in drinks, so your favorite orange or lemon-lime soda stayed perfectly mixed. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not exactly. BVO contains bromine, the same chemical found in flame retardants, and studies started linking it to health risks like memory loss, skin issues, and even nerve problems. Up until recently, BVO was hiding in a bunch of fruit-flavored drinks from big brands like Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. Think Mountain Dew and Gatorade. But here is the thing. It's one of those sketchy food additives that the FDA hasn't really kept a close eye on. Citrus-flavored drinks were the biggest culprits because BVO helps keep the flavoring evenly blended instead of separating from the sweetened water. The FDA eventually stepped in, and today, BVO is banned in many places. In 2014, Coca-Cola finally decided to ditch BVO and promised to remove it from all their drinks by the end of the year. Turns out no soda is worth a side of toxic chemicals. Certain wild mushrooms. When it comes to local dishes, foraging for wild mushrooms was a normal and even trendy way to add some earthy flavor to dinner. Some varieties, like Amanita muscaria and psilocybe mushrooms, were even sought after for their hallucinogenic effects. But as more cases of poisoning popped up, health officials took action. Certain wild mushrooms were banned due to their toxic compounds, unpredictable effects, and risk of misidentification, because let's be real, not everyone is a mushroom expert. Today, unless you are a trained mycologist, picking the wrong one can mean a trip to the emergency room. Aldicarb-treated produce. Back in the 1980s, Aldicarb was the go-to pesticide for keeping fruits and veggies pest-free. Farmers loved it because it worked like a charm, and shoppers never had to worry about a worm in their melon. But there was just one little problem. It was super toxic. Even small amounts left on produce could cause nausea, dizziness, and even worse, serious poisoning. For babies, the amount of Aldicarb residue they can end up consuming mostly from potatoes, citrus, and water can be 800% higher than what the EPA considers safe. On the other hand, kids between the age of 1 and 5 aren't much better off, taking in about 300% more than the recommended limit. One of the biggest Aldicarb-related disasters happened on the 4th of July in 1985. In Oakland, California, 3 people got seriously sick after eating watermelon, showing symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, muscle twitches, and dangerously slow heart rates. Meanwhile, people in Oregon were also falling ill. When investigators tested the watermelons, they found shockingly high levels of Aldicarb, a pesticide that wasn't even allowed on melons. After too many cases of people getting sick from contaminated food, regulators had enough. The EPA banned Aldicarb on most crops, and by the 2010s, it was mostly gone. In the end, safer farming won, and honestly, who wants poison with their produce? CFC processed foods, whipped cream cans, aerosols. Before the 21st century, CFCs were everywhere, even in food products like whipped cream cans and cooking sprays. These gases made things super convenient, helping push out perfect swirls of whipped topping or a fine mist of oil for cooking. But then came the bad news. CFCs were destroying the ozone layer. Scientists warned that these chemicals were punching holes in the Earth's protective shield, letting in dangerous UV rays. That was enough to sound the alarm. By the 1990s, CFCs were banned worldwide, forcing food companies to switch to safer alternatives. Turns out, whipped cream wasn't worth wrecking the planet.